The massive space station rotated slowly against the star field, its crystalline towers catching the light of 3 different suns. Dr. Kim Soo pressed his face against the small porthole of the human transport vessel, watching ships the size of mountains glide past with impossible grace. Some looked like living creatures carved from metal and light. Others resembled geometric puzzles that hurt to look at directly. "First time seeing the Nexus?" asked Engineer Park Min, floating up. Beside him in the zero-gravity section, the artificial gravity generators only worked in the main corridor of their small ship, leaving the observation areas in weightless peace. Kim Soo nodded, unable to find words. The hegemony's central hub made Earth's largest cities look like hills. Streams of vessels flowed in and out of docking bays that could swallow entire human fleets. Energy fields shimmered between the station's arms, containing what looked like miniature star systems, where different alien species conducted their business. In the main cabin, Ambassador Park Bo was reviewing his notes for the 100th time. His hands shook slightly as he turned the pages. This was humanity's first real chance at galactic recognition, and everyone knew how easily it could go wrong. "The Zephyrians control all major trade routes," he muttered to his aide, Lieutenant Choi Yu. "Crystal-based life forms, they think in mathematical equations. Don't make any sudden movements around them." Choi Yu was barely 25, fresh from the diplomatic academy, but her eyes held the sharp intelligence that had gotten her selected for this mission. "What about the Kethvar? Warriors, honor-bound, they respect strength but despise what they call crude emotion. And the Mnemosynes?" Park Bo's voice dropped. "Telepaths. They can read surface thoughts. Keep your mind focused on the mission." "Protocols." Through the ship's communication system, a mechanical voice announced their approach to Docking Bay 847 Gamma. The human crew exchanged nervous glances. This bay was deep in the station's commercial sector, far from the diplomatic levels where important species conducted their affairs. The docking process took 2 hours. Human technology required manual adjustments and careful maneuvering, while alien ships seemed to slide into their berths like liquid mercury finding its container. Kim Soo watched a massive Kethvar battlecruiser dock, with movements so precise it might have been choreographed. When the airlock finally opened, the humans got their first taste of truly alien air. It smelled of ozone and something sweet that made their sinuses burn. The gravity felt wrong too, slightly heavier than Earth normal, with a subtle sideways pull that suggested the station's rotation was creating complex artificial forces. Their escort was a Zephyrian trade coordinator, designated as Unit 47 Alpha. It stood 7 feet tall, its body a collection of living crystal formations that clinked softly as it moved. Where a human might have a face, it had a cluster of geometric shapes that pulsed with inner light when it spoke. "Follow. Do not deviate from marked path," it said, in perfectly pronounced but emotionless Standard Galactic. "Your species has been allocated Sector 7G for commercial activities. Duration of privileges contingent on compliance with established protocols." The walk through the station's corridors was both amazing and humbling. Alien beings of every imaginable shape moved past them with barely a glance. Some floated in containment fields, others skittered along the walls on multiple legs, and a few seemed to exist as pure energy constrained by magnetic bottles. Park Bo tried to maintain diplomatic composure, but Kim Soo could see the wonder and frustration warring in his expression. They were being treated like tourists in a museum, shown the minimum necessary to conduct basic business, while being kept far from anything truly important. The commercial sector assigned to humans was a single corridor with basic life support and minimal facilities. Other species had entire districts, complete with environmental controls matching their homeworlds and cultural centers that spoke of long-established relationships. "Your trading post will be established here," Unit 47 Alpha announced. "Human. Vessels may dock at stations 12 through 15 only. Raw materials may be exchanged for basic manufactured goods. Advanced technology transfers are prohibited." Lieutenant Choi Yu stepped forward. "What about cultural exchange, scientific cooperation? Our species has much to contribute beyond simple trade." The Zephyrian's crystal formations dimmed slightly, what might have been the equivalent of a condescending smile. Developing species often overestimate their capabilities. Your contribution level will be reassessed in 50 standard cycles. 50 years, Kim Soo realized. They expected humanity to remain exactly where it was for half a century, before even considering any advancement in status. As they were led back to their ship, the humans caught glimpses of the real power centers of galactic civilization. Through transparent walls, they saw vast chambers where mnemosiny advisors floated in pools of luminescent liquid, their tentacle-like appendages interfacing directly with quantum computers the size of buildings. Military planning centers buzzed with HFY officers coordinating fleet movements across multiple star systems. In the diplomatic quarters, representatives from dozens of species debated policies that would affect billions of lives. Humans weren't even mentioned in these discussions. They were an afterthought, a minor species granted the galactic equivalent of a corner booth at a restaurant. That night, as their ship prepared to return to Earth, Kim Soo stood again at the observation deck. The alien vessels around them moved with purpose and authority, their crews secure in their place in the galactic order. But something cold and determined was growing in his chest. The dismissive treatment, the casual contempt, the assumption that humanity would remain forever grateful for whatever scraps were thrown their way. They had no idea what they were dealing with, he thought. No idea at all. The emergency beacon from the new dawn cut through space like a scream. Captain Lee Hai was monitoring communications from the orbital defense platform when the signal reached Earth's outer sensors. At first, it was just another routine transmission from humanity's first colony ship, carrying families to establish a new world beyond the solar system. Then the signal became desperate. "Mayday, Mayday, this is colony vessel New Dawn," came the voice of Captain Park Sung. "We've encountered a navigation malfunction. Hyperspace coordinates are off by 0.7 degrees, attempting emergency correction." Dr. Kim Soo was in his laboratory on Lunar Station when the transmission reached him. His wife Lee Na had sent him a message just hours before showing their 8-year-old daughter, Kim, so drawing pictures of the new world they would call home. The little girl had been so excited about seeing alien plants, and maybe even friendly creatures. The beacon continued for exactly 47 seconds. Captain Park Sung's voice grew more urgent as he reported massive vessels appearing around them. Alien ships that dwarfed the human colony vessel like eagles surrounding a sparrow. Unknown vessels. This is a civilian transport carrying families. "We made a navigation error and are correcting course immediately. Please respond." Then came sounds that would haunt every human who heard the recording. Energy weapons charging, the new dawn's hull buckling under impossible forces, and finally the screams of 50,000 people as their ship was torn apart atom by atom. The silence that followed felt like death itself. Within hours, Ambassador Park Bo was demanding an emergency session with the Hegemony Council. The alien tribunal convened in their massive chamber, representatives from 12 species floating in their specialized environmental pods. The Zephyrian judge's crystals pulsed with cold mathematical precision as it read the official findings. Incident. Report 7842 Gamma concludes. Human vessel New Dawn violated Sector 3', designated protected space under Article 15 of the Galactic Preservation Act. Enforcement Patrol HFY 7 followed standard interdiction protocols. No malice intended. Park Bo stood at the human delegation's tiny podium, his diplomatic training battling against the rage burning in his chest. Around him, the alien representatives discussed the incident with the same emotion they might show. For a minor traffic violation. 50,000 innocent people, Park Bo said, his voice cracking. Children, families, people who just wanted to build a new life. They made a simple navigation error and you killed them all. The mnemosiny representative, a floating mass of writhing tentacles surrounding a pulsing brain-like core, extended its mental probes toward the human ambassador. Its telepathic voice echoed directly in every mind present. Emotional distress detected. Your species exhibits typical mammalian attachment to individual units. This impairs logical reasoning. Individual units? Park Bo slammed his fist on the podium. Those were people, human beings with names and dreams and families who loved them. The HFY military advisor, a massive insectoid creature with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked its approval. Human vessel ignored established boundaries. Weakness invites destruction. Your species should understand consequences of actions. In the gallery, Dr. Kim Soo watched the proceedings with growing horror. He had come hoping for justice, for some acknowledgement that 50,000 human lives had value. Instead, he was witnessing a casual discussion of genocide, treated as routine paperwork. The Zephyrian judge's final statement came with crystalline clarity. Standard reparations for navigation error, 500 standard credits to cover administrative costs of incident report. Human species reminded that protected space, violations carry escalating penalties. Future infractions may result in species-wide sanctions. 500 credits, less than the cost of a decent meal in the station's restaurants. That was what the galaxy considered 50,000 human lives to be worth. That night, as news of the tribunal's decision reached Earth, something unprecedented happened. Every human government, from the smallest island nation to the largest continental powers, received the same message simultaneously. It came through diplomatic channels, military networks, and civilian communication systems. Prime Minister Cho Da of the Korean Republic was the first to respond. Within an hour, she was on a secure line with President Johnson of the American Federation, Chancellor Mueller of the European Union, and Premier Chen of the Asian Collective. For the first time in human history, every world leader spoke with perfect unity. The message was simple. No more Dr. Kim Soo returned to Earth to find his world transformed. The grief was universal, but so was the anger. Families who had lost loved ones on the new dawn were already being approached by military recruiters, not for soldiers, but for something entirely new. Within weeks, Kim Soo found himself sitting across from Admiral Park Jin, head of Earth's newly unified Space Command. The office was stark and functional, its walls covered with star charts and tactical displays that hadn't existed a month before. "We need to understand them," Admiral Park Jin said without preamble. "Every species in that council, how they think, how they fight, what scares them. We need to know everything." Kim Soo nodded, thinking of his wife's last message, his daughter's, drawing still pinned to his office wall. "What do you want me to do?" "I'm creating a new division. Xenological warfare studies. Your job is to figure out how to hurt them where it counts." The Admiral slid a tablet across the desk. On it was Kim Soo's new title and a single mission statement. The galaxy must learn what happens when you threaten humanity's children. Across Earth, similar conversations were happening in laboratories, military bases, and research facilities. Humanity's greatest minds were being recruited for a single purpose. The aliens had treated human lives as disposable. Statistics. Soon they would discover that humanity had very different ideas about the value of life and the price of justice. In space stations orbiting every planet, construction began on vessels unlike anything humanity had ever built. These weren't exploration ships or trade vessels. They were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. They were instruments of very specific, very patient revenge. The first sign that something had changed came during the routine morning briefing at Hegemony Command Station, Alpha 7. Communication Officer Vexa was reviewing standard traffic reports when every display screen in the command center simultaneously went black. For exactly 3 seconds, absolute silence filled the massive chamber. Then chaos erupted. "Sir, we've lost contact with sectors 4, 7, and 12, reported the duty officer, his voice cracking with disbelief. "All quantum communication relays are down. It's like they just vanished." Admiral Zexmar of the HFY fleet had been enjoying his morning ritual of reviewing battle formations when his personal communicator died mid-transmission. Around him, his warrior caste officers stared at their own silent devices with growing confusion. "Technical malfunction," he growled, but something cold was crawling up his spine. In 3,000 years of galactic peace, the communication networks had never failed, not once. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Trade convoys found themselves isolated in the void, their quantum beacons useless. Diplomatic vessels drifted blind through hyperspace lanes that had been mapped for millennia. The invisible threads that held galactic civilization together had been cut with surgical precision. Captain Li Jin watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the stealth frigate. Quiet vengeance. Her ship hung motionless in the shadow of a dead asteroid, its hull wrapped in technology that bent light and gravity around it like water flowing around a stone. She was invisible, a ghost in the machine of galactic order. Phase 1 complete, reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Parktai. All primary relay stations are compromised. The hegemony is effectively blind and deaf. Li Jin nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display showing Kethvar supply convoy Delta 9 approaching their position. The alien warriors were following. Their usual patrol route, massive dreadnoughts moving in perfect formation like they had for the past 1,000 years. They had no idea they were flying into a nightmare. "Cyber warfare team, are you ready?" she asked. From the ship's technical bay, Engineer Yunda's voice crackled over the intercom. "All viral packages loaded and ready. Their systems won't know what hit them." The quiet vengeance had been built in the deep shipyards of Earth's asteroid belt, constructed by people who remembered the screams from the new dawn. Every bolt, every circuit, every line of code had been designed with one purpose: to make the galaxy's military forces experience true helplessness. As the Kethvar convoy passed within striking distance, Li Jin gave the order. Deploy. The attack began with silence. Invisible data packets flowed from human transmission arrays, slipping past alien firewalls like smoke through cracks. The Kethvar warriors felt nothing as their ship's systems began rewriting themselves from the inside out. General Thaxron was reviewing tactical reports in his command chamber when his flagship's lights flickered. For a moment, he thought it was a power fluctuation. Then his weapons officer began screaming, "Sir, the main guns are offline." "No, wait, they're turning toward our own escort ships. I can't override the targeting system." Around the bridge, displays showed impossible readings. Their own defensive systems were identifying friendly vessels as hostile targets. Life support was cycling through emergency protocols for no apparent reason. The ship's artificial intelligence was speaking in languages that didn't exist. "Engineering report," Thaxron roared into his communicator. "Sir, our entire computer network is compromised," came the panicked reply. "The code is rewriting itself faster than we can trace it. It's like fighting a living thing." Through the viewport, Thaxron watched in horror as his mighty dreadnought's weapons began firing on his own fleet. Escort vessels broke formation as their navigation systems sent them careening into each other. 3,000 years of military tradition crumbled in minutes. Then the human ship appeared. It materialized from nothingness like a predator stepping from the shadows. Sleek, black and bristling with weapons that seemed to drink light itself. Every sensor on Thaxron's bridge screamed warnings about energy signatures that shouldn't be possible. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself," he transmitted on all frequencies. The response came in perfect Kethvar military dialect, but the voice was human. "This is Captain Li Jin of the Terran Defense Force. Your weapons are disabled, your shields are down, and your life support will fail in exactly 10 minutes unless you listen very carefully." "This is not honorable combat," Thaxron snarled. "You fight like cowards, using tricks and deception." "We fight like humans," Li Jin replied coldly, "and we fight to win. You want to know what honor means to us? 50,000 civilians on a colony ship called the New Dawn. Remember that name." As the Kethvar fleet drifted helplessly in space, their systems controlled by an enemy they couldn't see or understand. Similar attacks were occurring throughout hegemony space. Human strike teams materialized from stealth, crippled entire battle groups, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. On the crystal world of Zephyr Prime, the planet's vast computational networks suddenly began calculating impossible equations. The mathematical beings that formed the core of Zephyrian society found their thoughts corrupted by viral code that made their logic circuits scream in electronic agony. Archive Keeper Zextal tried desperately to purge the invasive programs, but they adapted faster than his quantum processors could track them. Every attempt to fight back only made the intrusion stronger, like trying to stop a flood by throwing more water at it. "How is this possible?" he transmitted to his fellow archive keepers. "Their computational ability was rated as primitive. They should not be capable of this level of cyber warfare." The answer came from Monitor Yexadal, his crystalline form flickering with corrupted data streams. "They do not think like us. Where we use logic, they use chaos. Where we calculate optimal solutions, they embrace paradox. They have weaponized their own irrationality." But the most terrifying discovery came from the Mnemosini telepaths. Sage Ithara had been attempting to probe the mind of a captured human pilot when her consciousness recoiled in shock and pain. Instead of the organized thoughts she expected, she found a maelstrom of raw emotion so intense it burned her telepathic abilities. "What did you see?" asked her fellow sage Cthulhu, as Ithara writhed in her meditation pool. "Madness," Ithara whispered, her mental tendrils trembling. "Beautiful, terrible madness. They think with their hearts, fight with their grief, and love so fiercely it becomes a weapon. I cannot read them because they do not think like any species." We have encountered. Across the galaxy, the message was becoming clear. The humans were not just fighting back. They were rewriting the rules of warfare itself, turning the hegemony's own strengths against them with a creativity that bordered on insanity. And they were just getting started. The research facility on Europa had once been humanity's most advanced xenobiology laboratory. Now it served a darker purpose. Dr. Kim Soo walked through corridors lined with containment cells, each holding a different alien specimen captured during the ongoing conflict. But these weren't prisoners of war in any traditional sense. They were subjects of study. "A report on Subject 47, Kim Soo said to his assistant Dr. Lee Wan, as they stopped before a cell containing a HFY warrior. "Fascinating psychological profile," Lee Wan replied, consulting her tablet. "The subject experiences physical pain when forced to act in ways that contradict their honor code. Not metaphorical pain, but actual neural feedback that causes real suffering." Through the transparent barrier, the HFY warrior sat motionless, its insectoid features twisted in what humans had learned to recognize as shame. It had been captured 3 weeks ago, and in that time, the research team had mapped every aspect of its cultural programming. "And the broadcasting experiment?" Kim Soo asked. "Successful beyond our projections. When we transmitted recordings of HFY commanders surrendering, their entire command structure began to collapse. Warriors are abandoning their posts rather than risk being associated with dishonor." Kim Soo nodded grimly. 6 months ago, he had been a simple xenobiologist studying alien plant samples. Now he was architect of psychological warfare on a galactic scale. The transformation still surprised him sometimes, but then he would remember Li Na's last message, his daughter's drawings, and the cold purpose would return. In another section of the facility, Commander Yun So was conducting her own experiments with captured Zephyrian computational entities. The crystalline beings existed as living mathematical equations, their thoughts flowing in perfect logical sequences that humans had learned to corrupt with surgical precision. "Initiate Paradox Sequence 7, Yun So ordered her team. On the screens, around her, streams of data flowed into the Zephyrian subject's consciousness. The equations looked harmless enough, but they contained a trap crafted from the alien's own obsession with logical perfection. Each calculation led to another, more complex problem, creating an infinite loop that the Zephyrian mind couldn't escape. The crystalline being began to vibrate at frequencies that indicated severe distress. Its light patterns, normally steady and rhythmic, became chaotic flashes of color. Within minutes, the creature was caught in a recursive thinking pattern that would continue until its consciousness burned itself out. "Sir, we're receiving similar reports from Zephyr Prime," reported Lieutenant Park Dar. "Their entire computational network is experiencing cascading failures. They're trying to solve problems that have no solutions, and it's driving their civilization to madness." But the most horrifying experiments were taking place in the Psionic Research Division, where engineer Park Min had developed weapons that turned telepathic abilities into instruments of torture. The captured Mnemosini sage floated in its containment field, its tentacle-like appendages writhing in agony. "The feedback amplifier is working perfectly," Park Min reported to Kim Soo. When telepathic species try to read human minds during combat, they experience our emotions at thousand-fold intensity. The grief of every human who lost someone on the new dawn, the rage of every family member, the love that drives our desire for justice, all of it floods their consciousness at once. Through the observation window, they watched the Mnemosyne sage convulse as waves of human emotion crashed through its mind. The creature had expected to find organized military thoughts, tactical plans, strategic objectives. Instead, it encountered something no alien species had ever experienced: weaponized love. The psychological profile is complete, continued Park Min. Telepathic species across the galaxy are refusing to engage human forces. They're calling us mind poison and thought death. Several Mnemosyne collectives have gone into permanent isolation rather than risk contact with human consciousness. Reports flowed in from across the galaxy, each one confirming what Kim Soo had suspected from the beginning. Humans didn't need to be stronger or more technologically advanced than their enemies. They just needed to understand them completely and turn their strengths into weaknesses. General Thaxron's final transmission had reached Earth just hours before. The proud HFY commander, who had once commanded a battle fleet of 10,000 warriors, spoke from the bridge of his flagship as his crew abandoned their posts around him. "This is General Thaxron of the HFY 7th Fleet, final report." His voice had crackled through the communication array. "The humans have done something worse than defeat us. They have made us understand what we truly are." In the background of the transmission, the sounds of a ship dying could be heard. Not from weapons fire, but from systems shutting down as their operators simply walked away from their duties. "My warriors will not fight, because they have seen recordings of their comrades begging for mercy," Thaxron continued. "The humans broadcast these images across our military networks, showing us our own shame, our own weakness. How can we maintain honor when they have proven that honor itself is meaningless?" The general's voice became quieter, more reflective. "They do not destroy bodies. They destroy souls. They take everything we believe about ourselves and show us how pathetic it truly is. We thought we were warriors. We thought we understood strength. But they have shown us that we are children playing at war." The transmission ended with a sound that chilled every human who heard it. The whisper of a plasma weapon discharging one final time. Similar reports came from other species. Zephyrian archive keepers deleted themselves, rather than continue existing with corrupted logic systems. Mnemosyne sages voluntarily severed their telepathic connections, choosing blindness over the horror of touching human minds. Even species that hadn't directly engaged in combat began withdrawing from hegemony territory, terrified of creatures that could weaponize their very nature. Dr. Kim Soo stood in his office, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so peaceful. On his desk, his daughter's drawing remained pinned to the wall, a simple picture of humans and aliens living together under a bright sun. The innocence of it broke his heart every time he saw it. But that innocence was gone now, destroyed along with 50,000 lives in the cold void of space. What remained was something the galaxy had never encountered, a species that loved so fiercely they would burn civilization itself to protect their own. The aliens had wanted to treat humans as insignificant. Now they were learning what happened when insignificant creatures decided they had nothing left to lose. And the worst part, Kim Soo knew, was that this was just the beginning. The galaxy still had so much more to learn about the price of underestimating humanity's capacity for both love and vengeance. The silence came gradually, like a tide retreating from the shore. One by one, hegemony battle fleets simply turned around and headed for the deepest, darkest corners of space. Trade convoys rerouted themselves through longer, more expensive paths to avoid any system where humans might be present. The great communication networks that had once buzzed with chatter about the human problem went quiet whenever the topic arose. It wasn't surrender in any traditional sense. No treaties were signed, no formal declarations made. The galaxy's greatest powers had simply decided without discussion that some fights weren't worth winning. Captain Lee Hai stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel, New Tomorrow, watching. As her ship approached what had once been a heavily defended hegemony border station, the massive structure, built to monitor and control traffic in this sector, now sat abandoned, its lights dark and its docking bays empty. "Sir, we're receiving an automated message," reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Kim Ju. "Put it through," a mechanical voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect standard. "Warning, you are entering Terran-controlled space. This station has been evacuated for your safety. Please proceed with caution. We mean no offense." Lee Hai almost smiled. 50 years ago, this same station had been used to turn away human ships with threats and condescension. Now it broadcast apologies to empty space, just in case a human vessel might be listening. Behind her ship followed a convoy of colony vessels, each one carrying thousands of families to new worlds that humanity was claiming across the galaxy. These weren't the desperate refugee ships of the past, cramped and barely spaceworthy. These were magnificent vessels, built with technology freely, given by alien species too terrified to refuse human requests for cooperation. On Earth, in the same council chambers where Ambassador Park Bo had once pleaded for justice, a very different scene was playing out. Ambassador Song Mi stood at the podium that had once been positioned in the gallery's lowest tier, reserved for insignificant species. Now it dominated the center of the chamber, while alien delegates huddled in the shadows. "The quarterly tribute reports are acceptable," Song Mi announced, reviewing the tablet in her hands. "However, the Zephyrian Collective's contribution of quantum processors falls short of agreed-upon specifications." The Zephyrian representative, a crystalline being barely half the size of its predecessors, flickered with nervous light patterns. "Most honored humans, we beg forgiveness. Our manufacturing capabilities are still recovering from the difficulties of previous years." Song Mi's expression remained neutral, but every alien in the chamber felt the weight of her attention. Difficulties was the diplomatic term they used to describe the complete psychological collapse of Zephyrian civilization, when humanity had fed their computational networks impossible paradoxes that drove their greatest minds to madness. "Adjustments will be made," Song Mi said simply. "The Terran Accords remain unchanged. Human space is sovereign. Human ships have unrestricted passage throughout the galaxy. Any interference with human interests will be met with appropriate response." The assembled aliens nodded frantically, their various appendages, tentacles, and sensory organs quivering with barely controlled fear. Behind them, servo-robots wheeled in carts loaded with tribute. Rare metals, advanced technology, cultural artifacts, even live specimens from their homeworlds, all offered freely, desperately in hopes of maintaining the peace that humanity had imposed upon the galaxy. In the highest tier of the chamber, where once the most powerful species had looked down upon lesser races, a group of young Kethvar warriors watched the proceedings in silence. They were the children and grandchildren of the great General Thaxron, raised on stories of their ancestors' final shame. Unlike their forebears, they showed no signs of the proud warrior culture that had once defined their species. They had learned to bow their heads and speak softly, to never meet human eyes directly, to always remember that they served at humanity's pleasure. Dr. Kim Soo, now 93 years old, but still sharp as quantum steel, watched the proceedings from his private office overlooking Earth's sprawling capital city. Through his window, he could see the construction yards where humanity's newest colony ships were taking shape. Each vessel was a miracle of engineering, incorporating the best technology from a dozen alien civilizations, all freely shared by species too afraid to refuse human requests. His office walls were lined with reports from across the galaxy. The Minimosini Collective had voluntarily limited their population to prevent any risk of accidental telepathic contact with human minds. The surviving Zephyrian archive keepers had restricted themselves to basic mathematical functions, afraid that complex calculations might somehow trigger another human cyber attack. Even species that had never directly fought humans had restructured their entire societies around the principle of avoiding any action that might be interpreted as threatening. That are human interests. On his desk, his daughter's drawing remained in its place of honor, now preserved behind protective glass. Kim So's simple picture of humans and aliens living together had become a monument to innocence lost, a reminder of what the galaxy had cost itself through its casual cruelty. But the price had been paid, and paid in full. Through his window, Kim So watched as another convoy of human ships departed for the Outer Rim. These vessels carried families, children, scientists and artists, all the components of a growing civilization that no longer asked permission to expand across the stars. They simply went where they pleased, knowing that the galaxy would clear a path before them. In the deep space listening posts scattered throughout human territory, communication officers monitored alien transmissions with growing amusement. Parents of various species told their offspring bedtime stories about the Terran monsters who lived in the darkness between stars. These tales spoke of beings so terrible that even speaking their name could bring disaster. Creatures who could reach into your mind and turn your own thoughts against you. The stories weren't entirely wrong. On the bridge of the exploration vessel Bright Future, Captain Park 1 received a message from Sector Command. "Captain, you're clear to proceed to the Andoris system. Local authorities have been notified of your arrival and have prepared appropriate facilities." Park 1 nodded to his crew, a mixture of humans and carefully vetted aliens who had proven their loyalty to human interests. The Andoris system had once been the crown jewel of Kethavar space, a fortress world that controlled 3 major trade routes. Now it was being offered to humanity as a gesture of friendship. As his ship jumped to hyperspace, Park 1 reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. Humanity had never intended to become the dominant power in galactic civilization. They had simply wanted justice for 50,000 murdered civilians. Instead, they had discovered something far more valuable: the power to reshape an entire galaxy through applied psychology and the careful cultivation of fear. The war had ended 18 months after it began, not with humanity's victory, but with the galaxy's surrender to an enemy they finally understood they could never defeat. Humans didn't just fight with weapons or tactics or superior technology. They fought with the very essence of what made them human, their capacity for love, for grief, for righteous anger, and for the kind of creative vengeance that could turn an entire civilization's strengths into weapons against itself. Now, 50 years later, humanity spread across the stars like a gentle plague, claiming worlds not through conquest, but through the simple act of being too dangerous to refuse. The galaxy had learned its lesson well. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, alien children still whispered fearful tales about the species that had taught the universe what happened when you threatened humanity's young. They were right to be afraid. The end.